Thank you for joining Army Medicine at Work, a podcast devoted to the innovative and sometimes surprising work of Army healthcare professionals. In each episode, we'll introduce you to an Army officer working on the front lines of research and medicine that has the potential to transform care for soldiers and others around the world.
Today we have Colonel Eugene Soh joining us. Colonel Soh is a cardiologist at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and he's played a key role in bringing a new innovative heart valve replacement surgery to the hospital and the Army healthcare system. The procedure is called Transcatheter Aortic Valve Replacement, or TAVR, and it's helping save the lives of older high-risk patients. Thanks for being on the program, Colonel Soh.
Thanks for having me.
So I understand you served as a medical service officer in the Army before you started medical school. Can you tell us more about this particular Army experience and your path into medicine?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I started as a ROTC Scholarship winner at the University of Virginia. That was my really first introduction to the Army. I did not come from a background with any significant military experience. My parents were immigrants here, immigrating from Korea. I'm actually the firstborn child in my entire extended family who was ever born in the United States. But when I was going through high school, actually my older brother suggested that I consider an ROTC scholarship. And that was really my first foray into the military. So on a bit of a whim, I applied for an ROTC scholarship, and I was awarded a 4-year scholarship to go to the university of my choice. So ultimately, I enrolled in the University of Virginia, and I really had no idea what I was getting into. The Army was just something very foreign to me. I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to be a soldier. But I quickly came to really love the people that I served with, the honors and the customs and courtesies and the traditions that we have in the Army. And that really got me interested in serving for longer than just a few years. I initially, out of the ROTC program, I was commissioned as a Medical Service Corps officer, as you said. I went into the Medical Service Corps because I was interested in medicine, but I wasn't quite ready to take the dive to go into medical school. I was honestly not a great student in college and needed a little bit more time to mature. And I think coming on active duty as a Medical Service Corps officer, getting assigned right out of the bat as a platoon leader in Korea, really just opened my eyes and changed my discipline and my outlook, and really had a profound impact on me. And I really credit it with making me who I am today. I wouldn't have gotten there without that initial few years in the Army as a Medical Service Corps officer. So it helped pave the way for where I am now.
I think it's great for listeners to hear about that, and that you weren't necessarily the best student in college, but then you got on track. It might be more encouraging for some folks to hear that. And I know you focused your training and career path on cardiology. So what drew you to this specific specialty and subspecialties within the field? I
knew with as much certainty as you can know as a medical student that I wanted to be a cardiologist. I still pretty vividly remember the day in my second year of medical school. So the first 2 years of medical school are traditionally very classroom-oriented and lecture-oriented, just like you would imagine any other school. But there's little glimpses of patient encounters that you have early in medical school. And I remember almost the first time I ever put a stethoscope on someone's chest, coincidentally happened to be someone with a bad aortic valve. And I heard this tremendous murmur, and it got me hooked. And it got me very interested in cardiology, in the physiology of the heart. And that's, I remember, the first time I thought about becoming a cardiologist. And it's still, ironically now, as an interventional cardiologist and having introduced the Transcatheter Aortic Valve Replacement program, now it's that same murmur that I'm fixing with this new procedure called TAVR.
And we'll get to TAVR in just a minute. You mentioned how you weren't always the best student in college, but after being in the Army for several years, what was it like going back to medical school?
After being in the Army for 5 years, I was actually quite concerned about going back to medical school. Now I was going to class with the brightest of the brightest, and I was worried that I was going to get eaten alive, to be honest, because I'd been out of school for 5 years. But I found that my experiences in the Army, in terms of becoming a better officer, in terms of having better discipline, and really having goals in my life now, made school tremendously easier. I went from a mediocre student at best to having nearly a 4.0 in my first year of medical school, just with what I'd learned in my 5 years of prior service. It had a tremendous impact. I could not have done as well. I was not ready to go to medical school out of college. And the Army is exactly what I needed to help me prepare for my postgraduate education.
Let's talk about what you're doing at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. You weren't always here, right? You left for a little bit and then came back. What brought you back, and what is your current role?
I trained here initially at the old Walter Reed Army Medical Center in D.C. After that training, I did a civilian fellowship training program in interventional cardiology at George Washington University here in D.C., and then from there was assigned to the San Antonio Military Medical Center, also known as Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, where I was the director of the cardiac cath lab and the officer in charge of the ST elevation myocardial infarction program, what we call STEMI, basically in charge of the treatment program for taking care of the highest risk patients having massive heart attacks. So after 4 years there, I decided that I wanted to come back to Walter Reed, likely for my last tour in the Army, because I really enjoy the area here. I think Walter Reed is a wonderful hospital, and frankly, it's where I wanted to end my career.
Most of our listeners, I know, have heard about Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, but can you just tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. Walter Reed is also known as the President's Hospital. Every president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt has gotten their care here at Walter Reed, and I foresee that every president in the upcoming future will be getting their care here at Walter Reed as well. But what makes me proud is that Walter Reed isn't just the President's Hospital. It's also Private Smith's hospital. It's Specialist Jones's hospital. We treat everyone who's eligible. We treat those who are deathly ill, who are maybe 2 or 3 days from their injury in Iraq or Afghanistan. We treat the retired sergeants and colonels who are in this area and have heart attacks. We treat the family members of those beneficiaries as well. So, that's what really makes me proud, is that we're everyone's hospital who's eligible for care here. I like to think that Walter Reed is not only known for its care of the battlefield injured, but I'd also like to think that Walter Reed is really a cardiac center of excellence. We have a phenomenal group of not only cardiologists, but cardiac surgeons, vascular surgeons, really specialists in all the fields who can take comprehensive care of the sickest of the sick patients and provide excellent outcomes for those patients. That's what Walter Reed is to me.
And you mentioned TAVR earlier. You were a key player in bringing TAVR to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. What was the process like to get it here? Because I can imagine it wasn't easy. And why did you push to offer this particular procedure to patients?
You're right. It wasn't easy. It took quite a bit of time, added quite a bit of gray hair to my head. But every second that I spent, that really our team spent to start this program, was worth it. We wanted to start because we felt it was the right thing to do. We have a lot of patients that we follow in our clinic with aortic stenosis. That's narrowing of the aortic valve. That's the valve that connects the main pumping chamber of the heart to the aorta, which is the most important blood vessel that's in the center of your chest that supplies blood to your entire body and all your organs. So that valve opens and closes with every heartbeat. Think about how many heartbeats you've had in your lifetime. And that valve has to open and close at least 60 times a minute, 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours a day for your entire life. And over time, that valve will degenerate and narrow to the point when you're in your 80s, close to 10% of patients have some form of aortic stenosis. We follow a lot of older patients here at Walter Reed. There are a lot of older retirees. And I think that's important to remember, that people think that Army medicine is only for the soldiers. We take care of all of our own. You retire from the Army, then you're eligible for health care at Walter Reed or any of our medical centers or clinics. Because we have so many patients, before we had a TAVR program, our only choice was to send them to a hospital downtown that has been performing them. The centers in DC are phenomenal. They have great outcomes. They're large volume heart centers, and they've been doing this procedure for years. But I can tell you that our patients generally didn't like going. They liked being taken care of here. They like being taken care of here by my colleagues, my active duty colleagues, our civilians that work here at Walter Reed. They enjoy being taken care of in the Army system. And so they're loyal to us. And we felt it was important to return that loyalty by being able to offer them comprehensive heart care. And we feel that TAVR is an important part of that comprehensive care.
Is there anything about being an interventional cardiologist, maybe having the opportunity like this to offer TAVR, anything else where you feel like you might not have been able to do something in the civilian world? What other opportunities are there do you feel like you've had being in the Army?
I've had the opportunity to deploy to both Iraq and Afghanistan. I've had the opportunity to take care of truly heroes, not just today's generation of heroes, but yesterday's generation. Our first TAVR patient was a World War II and Korean War veteran. I've taken care of amputees from Iraq and Afghanistan with heart problems. That's not something that many civilian cardiologists can say. I doubt there are very few, unless they were in the Army, who can say they've provided care for patients having heart attacks in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's been a very unique experience.
With regard to TAVR, when did you start offering it here, and how has it been going so far, and what do you see in year 2 and beyond?
We started in November 2015. We did our first implant on an elderly man who was very debilitated from his aortic valve. And we really offered him a chance to live longer. And that's what TAVR has definitely proven, is even in an elderly population, we're seeing, compared to either surgery or just medicines, that people are living longer and better than they do without it. So since then, in the first year, we anticipated that we may do 10, maybe 15 TAVRs, and tomorrow we'll be doing our 23rd in less than a year. So we've really surpassed our expectations quite a bit. And I think that's largely because we're uncovering more and more patients who have severe aortic valve disease. Patients are sometimes coming to us because they know now that we're a TAVR center. We've been referred patients from as far away as Landstuhl, Germany, for this procedure. And also, I think a reason for the increase in numbers than we expected is that the indications for who should get TAVR are relaxing. So initially, TAVR was really only designed or indicated for patients who either were too sick to have an operation or were felt to be very high risk from an operation. And you can imagine who those patients are: older patients who have a bunch of other illnesses who may not do well with surgery. In the past few months, further studies have shown that TAVR is safe to do in lower risk patients as well. And it's as good as surgery. It's as good as open heart surgery at replacing this aortic valve. So because of that, I think we're seeing more and more patients eligible for it.
I know a big part of your role here is training medical students, residents, fellows. What would you say are some of the most important lessons or tips or advice you can offer them when it comes to cardiology?
Be passionate about what you do. I think that's really what's driven me in my career. I love coming to work. I still get a big kick out of taking care of patients, having heart attacks or doing TAVR. It's really brings me a lot of pride in what we're able to do here, my colleagues and I. So I think that's probably the best advice I could give, is really follow your heart, pardon the pun, and be passionate about what you do.
How about for our audience members who may be aspiring cardiologists or pursuing other healthcare careers? What would you tell them about working in Army medicine specifically?
Army medicine is incredibly unique. We have the most fascinating patients. We have really the honor and privilege of taking care of patients both on the battlefield who are in dire need of our services, to the elderly patients here at Walter Reed and other medical centers who have served 20 or 30 years in the Army and are now facing other challenges in their life. There's not many other systems where you have that honor and privilege to take care of heroes on a daily basis. And I think that's what makes us incredibly unique.
Where do you see your career going in 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
I don't know. I have been in the Army for 24 years now, and retirement is looming sometime in the future. I think the Army has given me incredible training opportunities, has given me a lifetime full of memories and great friends. I could see myself doing what I'm doing, exactly what I'm doing now, or I could also see myself transitioning to life in the civilian world, doing the same things that I'm doing, and really telling anyone who listens about how great my experiences were in the Army.
Great. Colonel Soh, thank you for sharing with our listeners some of the fascinating stuff that you do here at Walter Reed Bethesda. It's been really enlightening. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for future Army Medicine at Work podcast episodes about how the U.S. Army is pushing the envelope in healthcare innovation. For more information about Army healthcare careers, visit healthcare.goarmy.com.